special broadcast brought to you by SABC News. Tonight we're having a conversation with President Jacob Zuma following his State of the Nation address on Thursday evening. Mr. President, allow me to talk a little bit about jobs. You did talk last year about the Eurozone crisis that was then making it difficult for us to reach the sort of to employ more people. Now, government has also been in discussion with social partners, labor, business, and civil society about addressing this very same problem. Are you making any headway in those conversations?
I think we are making headways. We had a lot of discussions. Firstly, the fact that the previous State of the Nation address, we put the question of the job creation in this country as at the center of everything we're going to be doing. We even went further to put funds aside, which was creating the necessary enabling environment for investors to participate. And there was participation. There has been discussions, for an example, in NETLEC on these matters. I think we've made some headways. That is why we reported that we have been able to create jobs, even under very depressing situation economically in terms of the globe, but we have been able to do so. The infrastructure program is also, in a sense, talking to the question of jobs. In other words, we are no longer saying we're going to create jobs, even going further than saying here is a fund, see what to do with it. We are actually creating the opportunity for the investors to come. Once you have this kind of a program that opens up for investments to come in, we even address the question of how do we deal with the bottlenecks that the investors will complain about, that it is difficult because there are too many things that we've got to deal with. We are addressing that so that we make the question of investors, when they come to invest, to be easy to do business in South Africa. Once that happens, it means you create jobs, therefore you create opportunities of employment, and we are therefore addressing that question in addition to what we've been doing in the past year. We are adding more possibilities for jobs to be created.
But what is it, or what are the sort of things that you're asking for from the social partners? For example, is there something that you're specifically asking labor to do or to consider? Is there something you're specifically asking business to do or consider?
No. What we have been asking is that there should be a discussion between the social partners. Firstly, to understand the environment around which we are operating at this point in time. But of course, the talking to different partners would not be the same, because they don't contribute to the common pool the same thing. The investors in particular become very important, the private sector, because for the workers to do something, there has to be investment. There has to be the creation of jobs. Then they come in to deal with those kind of issues. I don't think we could dictate what then should they do, because these are the people who do business together. Because one employs, the other can be an employee. We can't then get in and talk about the conditions. All we are doing is to create this environment where there are more jobs. Once there are more jobs, there are more employment. They then discuss how they handle the situation going forward. I think ours to create environment, but also to ensure that whatever goes on between the two is within the parameters that helps the country to go forward.
Well, business often complains, for example, that the high cost of labor are making it difficult for them to create jobs. What is the government's standpoint on the cost of labor in this country? One, but two, is it a conversation that you're prepared to engage in with labor?
Well, not with labor only. We've got to engage with everybody. Because the private sector is going to say, look, the cost of labor is too high. And
agree with them on that.
We will find the workers saying the wages are too low, and the distance between the salaries of the management is very high. The gap is too big. Why is this gap too big? So it's a conversation that is ongoing. And I don't think as government is a conversation that we're going to make a judgment about. What democratic governments did ever since we came in was to deal with a very serious situation of other sectors of the workers were not at all recognized as workers. And therefore you can imagine what was the state of the salaries. And we've therefore said, let us move forward. We are not going to tolerate, for an example, a situation where there are workers who get the kind of slave salary. And therefore that's very important. However, we can't engage in the labor kind of dispute as government. That's a business between business sector and the workers. The perceptions about that issue is the perception that remains with the private sector. And the workers have got their own perceptions. And this is what is a continuous labor issue with the private sector. How do we create better working conditions? And how do the private sector create a situation wherein that kind of thing, there's a flexibility on both? What has been coming very sharply on both sides? Private sector saying the cost of labor, very high. The workers saying, yes, we hear you, but you pay yourselves too high. Now, I don't think the government must get there. Government must create an environment where we are able to make these two discuss this matter and see where it goes. It does concern us, indeed, that the gap is too wide. I think it's a matter that we are going to get into the conversation, certainly as going forward.
Well, labor, COSATU unions in particular, are concerned about labor brokers, for example. Part of the reason they want to embark on a strike. What is your view? What is government's view on labor brokers?
I think on the labor brokers, we have discussed this point, and I think I did indicate, I alluded to it in my address in Parliament, that in the course of this year, we are going to engage into a discussion to really say what are things that are abusive within the system so that we could deal with them. And we are also going to engage the labor on the matters that they are raising, which makes them to reach a conclusion that, in fact, you need to abolish them. These matters must be discussed. It's one thing when people move from their original positions about whatever demand they put or views they put across, but we are going to really get into a discussion, including the labor brokers themselves. What is it that they do which makes the labor feel very much offended about what they are doing? I think it's a matter that I can't sit here and say, look, this is a final kind of word. It's a matter that we need to engage and really look at the facts on the matter and finally persuade one another to come to a common position.
Let me end this part of our conversation, Mr. President, by going to a youngster, Thulani Ngwenya, who posted on our Facebook saying he's a young BCom graduate. He got 6 distinctions. He didn't get a job. And after a while looking for a job, he then put together a business plan, got an idea that someone bought into, but went to the banks, sought collateral, and that's where he is stuck. And he's been stuck at that point for a very long time. What message of hope do we give to youngsters like those?
Well, I think that is part of the problem that this country faces, that you have people who are graduated but who are unemployed. There are a number of factors that come into this one. For an example, companies these days, no matter what kind of qualifications you have, they need experience. If you don't have experience, they go for somebody who might even have lesser qualifications than you because he has or she has part of the experience they need. And that's why we were trying to open up a conversation at one point as to whether don't we need a bridging kind of a system wherein the new graduates are able to enter the market or the economic activities. Is a conversation that is ongoing. What do you do? But it also comes back to another question. If you are like the young man who has all the qualifications, can think, he does not sit at home, works out a business plan, present it to the bank is looking for a collateral. What do you do? And that's part of the challenge that faces now a very clear sector of the private sector, the banks. What do you do to a person who comes in that way? If a person does not have the possibilities to have a collateral that satisfies the bank, what do you do? these good ideas and this very bright person must just be pushed aside. I think, again, that's a conversation we needed to have, particularly with the banks. These are, in fact, the issues we've been raising over a period. What do you do with a person who comes in with an idea? Some people, and I've met people who complain that at times their ideas are stolen and given to other people because they wouldn't have what they call the security or the collateral. I think it's a matter as a society we need to talk about. How do we create the conditions that will help everybody else? I think from government point of view, what we can say, we are going to take up the matter to the private sector to say these are very clear, challenging, practical difficulties that face South Africans today.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Allow us to pay some bills. We will be back right after this short ad break.